You ever watch someone get completely disrespected, and instead of firing back, they just smiled? Not a nervous smile, not a fake smile, a cold, calculated, I already won smile. That right there is the most dangerous thing a man can do. I spent 3 years reacting my way out of everything good in my life before I understood this. My name is Vance, and for the next 30-something minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how the Stoics built that ability, and how behavioral psychology proves it's not just philosophy. It's a survival skill. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why reacting is the most expensive thing you can do. You're going to know the 3 triggers that make men lose control every single time, and you're going to walk away with a framework, a real, applicable framework that you can start using tomorrow morning. Not next year, not after you read 4 books. Tomorrow. But first, let's talk about what detachment actually is. Because most guys have it completely wrong. Here's the mistake almost every guy makes when he first discovers Stoicism. He reads a quote from Marcus Aurelius. Maybe it's the one that goes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He screenshots it, posts it, sends it to 3 people. And then the next morning, his boss says something sideways in a meeting, and he almost flips the table. Sound familiar? That's because he confused detachment with suppression, and those 2 things are not even close to the same. Suppression is the dam. You're holding everything back, pretending it's not there, white-knuckling your way through every situation. And dams break. Always, usually at the worst possible moment. Detachment is the river. The water is still there. The emotion is still there. But you're not the water anymore. You're the riverbank. You observe it. You don't become it. This distinction matters because behavioral psychology backs it up hard. A 2013 study out of the University of Michigan, and I'm going to keep the science accessible here, not a lecture, found that emotional suppression actually makes your body's stress response worse. Your cortisol goes up. Your heart rate goes up. Your decision-making gets worse. You're not calmer. You're just quieter on the outside while you're a dumpster fire on the inside. Detachment, on the other hand, what psychologists call cognitive reappraisal, actually reduces stress response at the neurological level, not just behaviorally, at the brain level. The Stoics figured this out 2,000 years before the fMRI machine existed, which is either impressive or embarrassing for us, depending on how you look at it. Probably both. Epictetus, a former slave, by the way, not some philosopher sitting in a palace, put it like this: "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Simple sentence, brutal implication, because if your reaction is the variable, if that's the thing you control, then every time you react emotionally, you are handing that control over to whoever or whatever triggered you. You are literally giving the keys to your brain to your enemy, or your ex, or your boss, or the guy who cut you off on the I-95. Think about that. Every emotional outburst is a transfer of power. It's you saying, "Here, take this. You're in charge now." The man who masters detachment never makes that transfer. He keeps the keys, always. And that's the foundation. But understanding it conceptually means absolutely nothing if you don't know what's actually triggering you. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because the 3 triggers we're about to cover, you're going to recognize all of them. Stick with me. Behavioral psychology has been studying emotional reactivity in men for decades now. And when you cut through all the academic language, it comes down to 3 primary triggers. 3 situations where men, across cultures, across ages, across income levels, consistently lose their composure. I call them the big 3. And once you name them, you can never unsee them. The first one is status threat. This is the big one. And it runs deeper than most guys want to admit. We are hardwired to monitor our social position. In the ancestral environment, a drop in status wasn't just embarrassing. It was dangerous. Lower status meant less food, less safety, less everything. Your brain still thinks that. So when someone disrespects you publicly, talks over you in a meeting, undermines you in front of your team, or openly dismisses your opinion, your amygdala fires like you're being chased by a predator. The amygdala doesn't know you're in a conference room. It thinks you're in the savannah. And your first impulse, that hot flush behind the eyes, that clenching in your chest, is to re-establish dominance immediately, loudly, visibly. Here's what the Stoics knew that your amygdala doesn't. Reacting to a status threat is the fastest way to confirm that it landed. When you snap back, raise your voice, get defensive, you're telling everyone in the room that the attack worked, that it got through, that it mattered. The man who doesn't react? He's communicating something else entirely. He's saying, "That didn't even register. You're not relevant enough to disturb my baseline." That is dominance, real dominance. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. The second trigger is injustice perception. This one is sneaky because it feels righteous. It feels justified. Someone screws you over. Someone breaks a commitment. Someone takes credit for your work. Or lies about you to someone you respect. Or gets the promotion you earned. And your brain says, "This is wrong. I should do something about this." And it is wrong. That part is accurate. The problem is that the emotional reaction you're about to have will almost certainly make your position worse, not better. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man on earth at the time, had more reasons to react than anyone, wrote this in his private journal. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, "The people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." He wrote that for himself, not for publication, not for performance. He was preloading his equanimity. He was conditioning himself to not be surprised by bad behavior, because surprise is what triggers reaction. When you stop expecting people to be fair, you stop being destabilized when they're not. That's not cynicism. That's calibration. The third trigger, and this one hits different, is identity challenge. Someone questions your competence, your choices, your values, your identity as a man, a father, a professional, a human being. And suddenly it's not about the argument anymore. It's about you. Your whole self feels like it's on trial. This is where most men blow up in ways they regret for years. Because the ego, and I use that word in the psychological sense, not the colloquial sense, the ego treats any challenge to self-concept as an existential threat. Same amygdala response, same cortisol spike, same impulse to eliminate the threat immediately. The Stoic solution here is elegant and brutal at the same time. It's called the view from above, or what Marcus Aurelius called the cosmic perspective. He would literally stop himself in moments of provocation and mentally zoom out. Not just from the room, from the city, from the country, from the planet, from the timeline of human history. Does this argument, this insult, this challenge to your identity, does it register from that altitude? Almost never. And here's the practical version. When someone challenges your identity in real time, you ask yourself one question before you open your mouth. Will this matter in 5 years? Not 5 days, 5 years. If the answer is no, and it almost always is, you're now free to respond from a place of choice rather than ego. You can still push back. You can still hold your ground, but now you're doing it on purpose. Not because you got poked and couldn't help yourself. If the answer is yes, if it actually matters at that scale, then it deserves your full, measured, deliberate attention. Never an emotional reaction. but a response. The man who can apply the cosmic perspective in real time, in the middle of conflict, that man is untouchable. Okay, you know what detachment is. You know what triggers you. Now comes the part most channels skip, because it's harder to make it sound cool. It's the actual training, the daily practice that builds this capacity in your nervous system. Stay with me, because this is where it gets practical. Detachment is not a mindset shift. It's not a perspective change you have once and then keep forever. It is a physical skill, a neurological capacity, like strength, like cardio. You don't get strong by understanding the biomechanics of a deadlift. You get strong by pulling the bar week after week until the adaptation happens at the cellular level. The same logic applies to emotional regulation. So here's the actual training protocol. 4 practices. None of them require a retreat, a therapist, or a $200 journal. Practice 1. The morning brief. Every morning, before the phone, before the news, before the first conversation of the day, you sit for 5 minutes and you run the day's probable provocations. Not catastrophizing, briefing. You think about the meetings you have, the people you'll interact with, the emails waiting, the situations that historically trigger you, and you pre-decide your response. This is what Epictetus called premeditatio malorum, premeditation of adversity. The Stoics didn't meditate to feel good. They meditated to prepare. Big difference. When you preload your response, the trigger still happens. But your brain doesn't have to improvise. It's already been there. It already knows the play. Reaction time drops. Emotional flooding drops. Composure holds. Practice 2. The 1-second rule. Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist, Holocaust survivor, one of the toughest human beings in recorded history, wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our freedom. 1 second. That's all it takes. Before you respond to anything that triggers you, 1 second, 1 conscious breath, 1 moment of choosing instead of reacting. That sounds small. It is not small. In that 1 second, you are interrupting the automatic neural pathway, the amygdala hijack, and rerouting through the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that actually thinks. You're switching from animal to architect. 1 second. Practice that every day. In small provocations first. The guy who doesn't use his turn signal, the passive-aggressive email, the offhand comment at dinner. Small reps. Build the muscle, so that when the big ones come, and they will come, the pathway is already grooved. Let me give you a real example of what this looks like. A guy I know, high performer, runs a team of 12, had a colleague who made it a habit of undermining him in front of leadership. Subtle stuff, the kind of thing that's hard to call out directly without looking petty. Old version of him? He'd fire back in the meeting. Get louder. Make it worse. After 6 weeks of the 1 second rule, just that one practice, something changed. The colleague said something sideways in a weekly review. Everyone waited for the reaction. He looked at him, paused 1 full second, then said calmly, "Interesting point. Let's revisit that after the numbers are in." That was it. The room shifted. Everyone felt it. The colleague never tried it again. 1 second, that's the whole practice. Practice 3. The evening audit. The Stoics called this the nightly examination. Seneca described it in detail. Before sleep, not while you're scrolling, actually before sleep, you review the day. 3 questions only. Where did I lose composure today? What triggered it? What would the prepared version of me have done instead? No self-flagellation. No guilt spiral, just data collection. You're an engineer reviewing the system's failure points, not a judge sentencing himself. Over time, this practice builds a feedback loop. You start to see your patterns, your specific triggers, your signature vulnerabilities, and what you can see you can manage. Fair warning, the first week of this practice is going to be humbling. You will run the audit and realize you lost your composure 4 times before noon on Tuesday. That's not failure, that's data. At least now you know you're a Tuesday morning problem. Practice 4. The discomfort protocol. This one is going to sound unrelated. It's not. Deliberate exposure to physical discomfort, cold showers, hard training, fasting, anything that produces a stress response you choose, builds what psychologists call stress inoculation. Every time you sit in discomfort voluntarily and choose not to react to it, choose to stay, breathe, remain, you're training the same neural pathway you need in social and emotional conflict. The body doesn't distinguish between cold water and a hostile board meeting at the level of the nervous system. Both are stressors. Both require the same regulation skill. The Stoics knew this. Cato walked through Rome in cheap clothes in summer, not because he was broke, because he was training himself to not care what people thought. He was choosing discomfort voluntarily so that involuntary discomfort would never own him. That's the game. Okay, the practices are in. But here's what nobody talks about. What detachment actually looks like in the real world. Not in theory, not in a monk's cell. In your actual life. At work, in relationships, in conflict. The next section is where this gets applied, and it might be the most important part of this whole video. Picture this. You're in a meeting. Your boss just blamed you. Publicly. In front of the whole team. For a project failure that wasn't yours. The room goes quiet. Everyone's looking at you. Your face doesn't move. Not because you don't care, because you've been here before. In your head, in your morning brief, in your reps. You already ran this scenario. You already know your move. That's detachment in the real world. Not theory. Not a monk's cell. Tuesday morning. Conference room. Fluorescent lights. Let's break down exactly what to do in 3 situations every man in this audience is going to face. Your boss publicly criticizes your work. Your colleague takes credit for your idea. Someone challenges your competence in a room full of people. The untrained response: defend immediately, get louder, get faster, prove you're right in real time. The cost of that response: you look reactive. You look emotionally invested in a way that reads as fragile, not confident. And you give the other person complete narrative control, because now the story is about your reaction, not about the original incident. The trained response looks like this. You pause. You lower your voice, not raise it. You say less than you want to. You respond to the content, not the tone. And you wait. Because time almost always reveals who was right, without you having to fight for it. There is a quote often attributed to Napoleon, and whether he said it exactly this way or not, the insight is real. Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. Your silence in a room is not weakness. It is a weapon. A specific, calibrated weapon that most people don't know how to use because they're too busy talking. Scenario 2. Relationships. I want to be careful here because this is not about being cold to the people you love. Detachment is not indifference. That needs to be said clearly. Because the last thing you need is to watch this video, go home, and when your partner asks why you seem distant, say, "I'm practicing detachment." Do not do that. What detachment actually is in a relationship is not allowing your emotional state to be piloted by someone else's emotional state. When someone you're close to is dysregulated, angry, anxious, testing you, your nervous system wants to mirror them. That's co-regulation. It's biological. It's not weakness. It's how humans are wired. But here's what happens when you train detachment. You become the anchor in that dynamic instead of the second wave. When she's in the storm, you're the harbor. When he's spiraling, you're the fixed point. That is not coldness. That is emotional leadership. And here's the psychological reality of what that does. Calm is contagious. Just like panic is contagious. When you hold your baseline in a dysregulated environment, you are literally pulling the nervous systems of the people around you toward yours. You are de-escalating by existing. That is power, quiet, steady, undeniable power. Scenario 3. Direct conflict. Someone wants a reaction from you, needs one, is escalating specifically to get one. This happens. People do this. Sometimes it's conscious manipulation. Sometimes it's just someone who's in pain and they want company. Either way, the goal is to provoke you into behavior that makes you look bad or feel bad or do something you can't take back. The Stoic response to this is almost offensive in how simple it is. Don't give it to them. Not because you're suppressing, not because you're scared, but because you understand what they're actually doing and you've chosen not to play. Seneca wrote, and this one hits every time, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Not forever, not indefinitely, just long enough for your prefrontal cortex to come back online, just long enough to choose your response instead of have it chosen for you. The man who can sit in conflict, fully present, fully aware of what's happening, and still choose, is not a pushover. He's not passive. He's not afraid. He is the most dangerous person in any room. Because dangerous people react. Powerful people respond. We're almost at the end. But before I wrap this up, I want to leave you with something that doesn't show up in most Stoicism videos. The actual cost of mastering this, and why most men won't do it. Because it requires something most of us were never taught to value. 30 more seconds. Stay with me. Here's what nobody tells you about developing emotional detachment. It will make some people deeply uncomfortable. When you stop reacting on cue, people who relied on your reactions, to feel powerful, to feel significant, to regulate their own anxiety, they will push harder. They'll escalate. They'll try new angles. They'll accuse you of being cold or checked out or not caring anymore. What they're actually experiencing is the loss of control over you. And that loss, for someone who's used to having it, is disorienting, sometimes enraging. Expect that. Preload it. Don't be surprised by it, and understand, this is not a reason to go back. It's a signal that the training is working. There will also be a moment, and this happens to every man who goes down this road, where you mistake detachment for numbness, where you start to wonder if you've gone too far, if you've lost access to something. You haven't. Detachment doesn't kill emotion. It gives you the choice of when and where to deploy it. A surgeon doesn't stop caring about the patient. He suspends that care during the operation because that's when it would hurt, not help. Then he cares again, fully. That's what you're building, not a wall, a valve. And the reward, the actual lived reward of this practice, is hard to describe to someone who hasn't felt it. It's not happiness exactly. It's closer to steadiness. A kind of baseline that doesn't move when the world does. Marcus Aurelius described it as the rock that the waves break against. He didn't say the waves stop. He said the rock holds. That's what you're after, not a life without turbulence, a self that turbulence cannot move. Epictetus, who started as a slave and ended as one of the most respected philosophers in Rome, said, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." He had every reason in the world to be angry, to be reactive, to feel that the external world owed him something. He chose differently, not because he was soft, because he understood something most men spend their whole lives missing. The only thing you ever actually had was the decision of how to meet what happens to you. That's it. That's the whole game. And once you own that, once you feel it in your bones and not just your head, Nobody can take it from you. Not your boss, not your ex, not anyone. You become, in the truest sense, a free man. And here's the thing nobody tells you about free men. They're quiet about it. They don't announce it. They don't post about it. They don't need you to know. You'll just notice, someday, in some room, that they're the only ones who aren't rattled. That's the tell. That's what you're building toward. That's the art of detachment. Not checking out, not going numb, not building walls, becoming the kind of man who can stand in the middle of chaos, stay completely present, and still choose. If this hit different, if something in here landed in a way you needed it to, share it with one person. Just one. The guy who's been reacting his way out of things he should have kept. The one who's tired of being controlled by what's happening around him. Subscribe if you're building something real. Every video on this channel is built around one question. What did the Stoics know that we forgot? Drop in the comments, what's your biggest trigger, the one you're still working on? I read every single one, and the best ones become the next video. I'll see you in the next one. Stay steady.